and it's a game changer. Now, all the resources of CNBC are at your fingertips with a customized desktop ticker, live updates, and on-demand access to exclusive CNBC analysis.
Dave's thinking about making a play in pharma.
Well, tell him he can watch that hearing today on the site at noon.
Let's reschedule this until after the decision at noon.
The new CNBC.com. Trade up.
The Bond Report is sponsored by...
Wall Street holding on to gains at this hour. Optimism about the economy on the heels of today's jobs report, helping to lift stock prices as we enter the final and most important hour of the trading day. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Closing Bell. I'm Maria Bartiromo, coming to you today live from Washington, where I spoke exclusively with Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson earlier today. We'll have part one of my one-on-one interview in just a moment.
And we're looking forward to that, Maria. Over here at the exchange, I am Dylan Radigan. In the markets right now, we're seeing a market that is modestly higher, has been through most of the day. Investors welcoming a jobs report that painted a mostly positive picture about our economy. Meantime, one of today's notable movers, other than Citigroup, McDonald's, shares of the fast food chain hitting a 7-year high on the back of strong sales in November, led by gains in Europe. More on that story in just a moment. Maria.
A lot happening today. One of the big stories on the street today, meanwhile, the jobs numbers really set the tone for investors this morning on Wall Street. The U.S. economy added 132,000 new jobs last month. That number was higher than what economists were looking for. The unemployment rate did, however, move up fractionally to a level of 4.5%, still considered virtually full employment. Wages were also up. They ticked up 0.2% last month. We'll get more on what fixed income investors are saying about today's data a little later on in the program. Dylan.
Markets themselves look like this. Dow Jones Industrial Average an advancer to the tune of 33 points. The deep cyclical names, along with Citigroup, leading that charge, have been holding there basically with that 0.25 percentage point advance throughout the afternoon. 12,311. The Nasdaq right now a winner to the tune of 13 points. Large cap tech having a reasonable day and holding on to that 0.5 percentage point advance. Again, financials and deep cyclicals among the better performers right now in the S&P 500. You'll see it's up between that 0.25% and 0.5% mover, 2.27% right now. Our team covering the markets here at the exchange, up at the Nasdaq, out in Chicago, along with our special guest. We begin with Mary Thompson, who is our eye on the floor today. Mary.
Thank you, Dylan. As you mentioned, stocks are up. This on today's mixed data. We had a stronger jobs report, weaker number on preliminary sentiment from the University of Michigan. Dollar rebounds, more on that from Maria later. And of course, toward the end of the day, we saw a sell-off in oil. That's not helping the markets so much. Transports have pared some of their losses, but not by much. Again, the story stock today is Citigroup. Volume is big here on the Dow component. We've seen 45 million shares change hands. Typical volume is 16 million. Again, the reasons, rumors swirling about a possible management change there. The company denying that. A possible restructuring. The company denying that as well. Nevertheless, its stock, one of the biggest winners among the Dow's 30 components, along with Pfizer, Verizon, Caterpillar, American Express, and McDonald's. Ford, a loser this week, down 11% on very big volume. Today, we've seen volume of about 162 million shares. That is the least amount of volume we've seen in the last few days. Of course, all of this coming in the wake of the firm boosting its convertible bond offering to $4.5 billion. A couple of stock buybacks to tell you about. Genworth and Safeway, both of these companies increasing their stock buyback programs by $500 million. And then we have Catalina halted for news. This is a marketing services company. Earlier said that it's exploring a number of possible takeouts by private equity firms. Again, the stock was halted about 2 o'clock. No news yet on that. Again, the Dow's up 33. Now let's head to the Nasdaq and see what's happening there. And Scott Wapner. Or back to Maria. I'm sorry.
Thanks very much, Mary. Well, we're going to go to the Nasdaq, actually. There's a little sneaker company making a big splash on Wall Street. In fact, it is turning out to be one of this year's most successful new issues. CNBC's Scott Wapner is there at the Nasdaq market site. He's looking at that angle. Scott.
I certainly am, Maria. We'll go right to the wall and check it out, and the numbers don't lie. Up 56% for Heelys. This is the company that makes those sneakers with the wheels and the heels. Opened $21 today. You see where the stock is right now, $32.75. That $21 range was above that set $16 to $18 range. Darren Ravel coming up at the bottom of the hour with much more on this story. But Healy's quite a story today. As were semiconductors, you can really tell the tale of today's market by looking at the stocks, because early on today, when you had that national semi guidance warning, you saw the market sell off. Then things seemed to improve a little bit. There was another sell-off, a bit of a roller coaster ride today. If you come back out here, we'll talk about another chip maker that was not able to break that slide, and that would be Xilinx. Those shares falling by more than 5% today. JP Morgan cutting the stock to neutral from overweight. The chip maker itself cutting its outlook for the current quarter, citing weaker than expected business for the month of November. Expedia, another very interesting story of today, up 10% right now, was up even higher just a short time ago. The stock was halted for quite a while early on because it announced that it planned to repurchase up to 30 million shares in common stock. Take a look at the intraday, and you'll see that big jump after it announced this plan. The tender offer will price the shares between $18.50 and $22, and that does represent about 10% of those outstanding common shares. Let's go down and talk about Palm. Those shares rising by 0.3% today. UBS initiating that stock with a neutral rating, believes that competition is mounting in the smartphone market from the likes of RIM. You know about that BlackBerry Pearl, big seller there, Motorola and Nokia. Cheesecake Factory down here up just about 1% today, says it has corrected errors found on financial statements, had to do with how it accounted for unused gift cards, bonuses, and then amortized the costs of liquor licenses. And finally, we'll end on EchoStar. Dish falling by 0.2%, cut to a hold from a buy over at Sanders Morris Harris based on valuation. If we can quickly take a chart here, you'll see that valuation over the last 6 months. That stock has had some nice gains. Dylan, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Scott. As we touched on briefly, all eyes were on the November jobs report today. The Labor Department reporting non-farm payrolls up 132,000 last month. That was higher than had been forecast. One downside, the construction industry shedding 29,000 jobs. That correlates to the cooling in the housing sector. The unemployment rate also ticking up to 4.5%, while average hourly earnings gained 0.2 of a percentage point. Getting more on what the fixed income investors are saying about today's numbers. Rick Santelli live in Chicago at the Mercantile Exchange with today's bond report. Rick.
Dylan, it was a whopper day. No matter how you slice it, interest rates and the dollar moved dramatically higher, and you hit it on the head. Look at an intraday chart of two-year note yields, the most sensitive to anything that gives the implication that the Fed might not be easing anytime soon. The data, maybe construction lost the dollar in a meteoric fashion. And Maria, if you're there, my hat's off to you.
Thanks very much, Rick. Well, you know, he was very optimistic about the economy. I guess that was behind those market-moving comments from Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson today, right here on CNBC earlier, as Mr. Paulson prepares to leave for China in what's being called a strategic economic dialogue. He sat down with me for an exclusive interview and said China needs to move quickly on economic reforms because of rising protectionist pressures. I also asked Mr. Paulson specifically how China should make adjustments to their currency.
They are not going to get where they need to get in terms of moving up the value-added chain.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
We'll talk with you soon.
Thank you.
45 minutes off our last closing bell of the week. The markets are higher.
Dylan, speculation about a mega banking deal lighting up Wall Street today. Up next, the odds of an international tie-up between Bank of America and Barclays. Here what the CEOs of both banks told me just over the last couple of weeks about those possible acquisitions.
Walmart facing another labor-related firestorm, but this time in a place far away from the United States. We'll tell you who's pointing the finger.
And then stay with us after the bell tonight. Talk about adversity. Walmart cutting ties with its new ad agency and firing 2 top marketing executives. Next up, how a strategic struggle could hurt the retailer's bottom line. That's ahead at 4 o'clock on the East Coast.
But first, the most active names right here at the New York Stock Exchange on a Friday afternoon.
You're watching Closing Bell on CNBC. First in business worldwide. The Bond Report.